Welcome to Outa Space, International Arts and Class Struggle Podcast.
Historical memory, Spanish Civil War, contemporary struggles, and the experience of a woman. An interview with Judith Berlowitz. Hello, I'm Rob MacDonald and I am your host for Outa Space International Arts and Class Struggle podcast. This podcast is part of a series of podcasts that we are doing related to the historical memory of the Spanish Civil War, particularly the Solidarity Park project. So we're going to be talking to lots of artists involved in that project. What are their reasons to be involved? How do they see the fight against fascism and the far right today? But also their general political outlook, and touching on many of the questions that the podcast normally talks about. We're also going to make a bit of investigation into the role of women in the struggle for the historical memory today, the recuperation of the memory. We'd also like to thank the Diputació de Barcelona and Amical, the International Brigadistes Association in Catalonia, for their support in this project. Okay, let's go to the podcast. Well, hello, and today I'm joined with Judith Berlowitz. Sorry about that, I haven't pronounced it correctly. Hi, Judith, are you there?
I'm here, definitely. Good morning, or good afternoon, or good day.
Yeah, it's good evening for me, and okay. It's good morning for you, is it?
It's pretty good, yeah.
Okay, so we're recording from Barcelona and you're in San Francisco, is that correct?
That's right.
Nice one. Okay, so we invited you onto the show to talk about a whole lot of things. But first of all, I want to say who I think you are, because social media is a bit strange these days. I feel like I've known you for a long time because you've been supporting the project on social media. You've done some translations for Solidarity Park, and I think, oh, there's Judith. Yeah, she's up to this. And so you kind of think you know people, but you don't really until you see them online. I don't think that maybe I'm making the bridge there. But as I understand it, you've done many things, but you've been a translator, you've been a teacher, you've been in academia, you do music, you're in a choir, and you're a political activist, and importantly for today's discussion, you're also a novelist. I mean, that's a list of things, but who are you from your perspective?
I'm all of those things, plus maybe we haven't even gone into this, a genealogist. Okay. I guess you could say semi-professional, or an obsessive genealogist. Okay,
interesting.
Addicted to genealogy, which is what took me into the novel part that we're going to talk about.
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, the reason I invited you onto the show, because with the Solidarity Park project, we're always interviewing artists, and we're talking about the historical memory of the Spanish Civil War because of the Ciudad de Barcelona, and there seemed to me to be a really big gap, not only in the work that we're doing in the historical memory, but also in general around the question of the role of women in the Spanish Civil War, but also in recuperating the historical memory. And in recent years, certainly the feminist struggle has been very powerful, particularly here in Spain. And I felt that we needed to talk about that more. So I was on the lookout, for interesting people to interview. And I see that you sort of tick all those boxes of interest for us around the novel that you've written, which we will come into a bit more. So yeah, I mean, the novel itself, do you want to give us like a little bit of an insight to what it's about?
Sure. What you mentioned, the gap, and I think that gap is created, deliberately created, and that the taboo of historical memory is also created. That I think historical memory is a human right, and that it is deliberately violated in order to manipulate a population. And I think the novel kind of responded to that. The novel actually came out of genealogy.
Okay.
I was doing research on the Phillipsborn family, my Phillipsborn family, and one of my Phillipsborn cousins in Chicago said, I want you to find everyone, which not so easy. I mean, the name is not that common, but it's also not completely unheard of. So, so there, in other words, there are many people with that surname. So searching for that, I came across an entry in an article in German about German volunteers in the Spanish Civil War. And here came the name Klara Phillipsborn, who was the only woman in her state of Schleswig-Holstein to volunteer with the Communist Party as a nurse and a translator. So there we have already 3 different aspects. She's a woman, she's a nurse, she's a translator. That's 4. She's a communist, and she's a German. How many? I've lost count. So those boxes are as hard to tick at once and to kind of access all at once for all of us. But I had to kind of focus on that because I had studied Spanish, sort of a semi second language speaker of Spanish, was married to a Spaniard the first time around. And so it really caught my attention, and also the political interest.
And your background in academia, that's in Spanish? I read on your profile in Spanish culture. Is that?
It is technically my degree is in Romance languages. So in theory, I'm supposed to know them all, including Romanian. And, so not quite.
Yes, because I remember when you offered to do a translation, you gave me a whole list that you could do.
Oh, did I? I don't even remember.
I went, okay, this is good.
Yeah. So but my concentration was in Spanish, and it was in Golden Age literature, and my dissertation was on romancero, which also has to do with historical memory. Going back to that, I'm going to ramble a little bit, but that the topic really resonates with me because, again, I say it's a human right, and that historical memory is traditionally oral history, and oral history is traditionally women's provenance, I think. Yeah, providence, and that this is how events are passed along. By it would maybe in a pre-literate or pre-technological society, that it's women's job to pass along the history. And if you deny that to women, then you deny it to a whole population. And then if you deny women themselves, it's kind of a double censorship, double denial.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, one of the things I've come across while studying the Ciudad de Barcelona is lots of stories of on the boat. There are no women we know of, but there's the lives of the people that are affected. But most of the letters are written back to women. So when you talk, so the letters to their mothers or letters to their girlfriends, and also the people, when I talk to the families who are most devastated and the most central, and women are central to the family, in many ways. So what you're saying here about oral history and how it's passed, I think that's something that's not, I've not thought about properly. I mean, I know that what you're saying is right, but, it's very interesting.
The letters are to the women because they're the keepers of the tradition, the keepers of the history, and they're expected to retain it and pass it along. And then Franco says, cueste lo que cueste, no matter what it costs, I'm going to eliminate all that, even if I have to kill everyone. And so this lasts till today, of course.
Yeah, I mean, the history is recorded by the people who win. Right. And in our society, women are often not the people who are in those positions of power and telling how things were, even though what you're saying is that they historically are, and actually in our real society, not the one on the television, not the one in the propaganda, but the one in our real families, the women are, very important for that. I mean, one little experience that pops into my head is the miners' strike in the 1980s in Britain, which had a profound effect on me. It made me the person I am. And it was the women, the men were on strike. Yeah, but it was the women that were the solid base behind it all. They were the ones running the purse of the houses. They were the ones, and without that behind them, nothing happens in the workers' movement.
Right. And then there's Greenham. Is it Greenham Common?
Yes, I was actually at Greenham Common as a young boy.
Really?
Yeah, my mum, my mum took me there a number of times, for an education, but also because she was being involved as a feminist woman herself.
That's great. And as a member of Women in Black, we owe a lot to Greenham Common and to the Black Sash in South Africa and to the mothers in the Plaza de Mayo in Buenos Aires. And this is women not only passing on tradition, but standing up against the suppression of tradition, of history, the suppression of history.
So, yeah, and this is why, from a historical memory point of view, this is critical that the historical memory people, if you call us that, people that are in for fighting, for what really took place, because as many people probably know, after while Franco was there, everything was suppressed, and then in the transition period, everything was pretty much swept under the carpet, different depending on how you want to look at it, and it's really this generation, or we've had a generation now who are asking the questions, and historical memory is exploding in a way. Solidarity Park is part of a series of different projects and events and books that are really saying, well, what did happen? And I think your book and your outlook and what we're saying here, very much part of that, no?
It's kind of reclaiming the right, I insist. Yeah, and my book is definitely a part of it because it is from a human point of view. It's not. I'm not an historian. I'm not an anthropologist. I don't know what else. I'm not a lot of things. So I don't know. It's sort of a vessel or an instrument or something. It's amazing about fiction because everything I wrote before this book was academic. It was boring. It was stuck to the rules. I had footnotes and sources, and that some of that kind of passed through to being a fiction writer, because I'm writing historical fiction. So I have to be accurate as to facts. I used a lot of newspapers, and thank heaven for digitalization of Spanish newspapers. I got a lot out of that. So.
But I mean, I'm just so we're not going to give a huge spoiler because the book's not out until the summer, and I'm 2/3 of the way through it now, and I've jumped ahead here and there. I'm not a hard reader, but I've really enjoyed what I've taken in so far. But the discipline of your history, I think, is very important, and I've read it with that in mind. I mean, the structure of the book is you do it in like a diary structure, hey?
Exactly.
And so it jumps from dates to dates, and it follows. If I'm correct, it's reflected of this family relative that you've got, Klara.
Yes.
And it follows her story as a nurse and as a German, and what I found, first of all, on the because we've been talking about the historical aspects, as a historical novel, I think it's really sharp on the history. When you're talking about, that's my feelings on it. But history is remembered in different ways. And from the Solidarity Park project, what I've noticed is that, particularly on the question of how many people are on the boat, we don't actually know, but we have a whole range of people that have had a different opinion. So history is also, it's taken from different places. And one of the reasons for the Solidarity Park to be based around artists is because we express it all in a different way. And I see your book as not an academic book, as reading it now. It's a novel. It says so, but also because it's a historical novel, but it's accurate. And I think that's the most important thing, because if you're mixing those two things, you've got to get that right, I suppose.
Well, a part of art, art is also a human right.
Yeah.
So that gives, and the poetic license is therefore a human right. And so we can play with play with reality, I guess, is what we do.
But when I'm reading it, I don't read that you're playing with the historical facts. I think you're listing them out nicely. You're putting them in their proper place. When I'm reading it, is as I understood it in a way, but you're talking of it from a particular character's point of view.
Right.
And I found that the I don't know, the rewarding thing when I'm reading it, because I'm with Klara. I'm sensitive to this character, and at the same time as I know that what you're saying is you're not making that side up, if you know what I mean.
Right, but there's the human response that I'm playing with, because just as the different versions of the amount of people on the Ciudad de Barcelona varies, the human responses can vary according to, this is like a truism, according to the humans. And and as a novelist, you kind of gets into the character. I always used to write in a very isolated way, and now having written this book, I'm in contact with other writers, and writers of fiction seem to have this in common, that the characters, this is so obvious, take on a life of their own. And that was important to me. That to me is art, is the artistic part of it, the imagination and creation of the response to the historical event, which also, as you say, there are so many versions that maybe there is no one reality.
No, there isn't.
Yeah.
I don't think there is one true anything. I mean, if you look into quantum physics and these kind of things, when they discuss those scientist ideas, which I love all that stuff. I listen.
Oh, you do.
Yeah, people think I'm interested in the Spanish Civil War and art and these things. That's my first love, and actually there is no real reality. There is reflections of reality, and I think art is very useful because we do that naturally. Maybe talk about the character a bit, because this weekend, in the run up to this, I've been engrossed in your book, and I've been traveling along with Klara while doing
Klara.
Oh, sorry, Klara. Yeah. I've been traveling along with her, and so I've been getting to know her. In before I get to know you, obviously some of this character is going to be some of you in there, going to be some of this relative, and I found her to be, how can I say it? She's inquisitive, she's strong, and she's a rebel, but she's also sort of, I don't know, not naive, but experiencing. I mean, I don't know if that's who you're after. I mean, the fact she's a young scientist. She bumps into Einstein and all this kind of stuff, and I think, this is cool. I'd like to be that, But what I found interesting was this juxtaposition between a very powerful woman and also somebody who's going along with the flow. She's very loyal to the Communist Party, certainly at the beginning. But everything in her life is being questioned. And I just want to explore this character, while we talk about historical memory and, the fight today of feminism. Let's talk about this character a little bit. Could you explain her?
Sure. I think there's an openness to Klara as an individual. Part of a Jewish family that has a certain tradition, but they are also part of a very assimilated society in Germany. The German Jews were not even considered Jewish by some more Orthodox Jews in Germany. And she, at the same time, is as being open, that she's innocent, and therefore she's vulnerable. So these events that can be just put on paper affect her physically, mentally, emotionally, and this is what motivates her to do whatever she does, to think whatever she thinks. Also, some other characters in the book that she comes in contact with influence her feelings and thoughts and behaviors, which she kind of combines with what she has learned up to date with her tradition. So she's a complicated lady.
Yeah. I mean, the title of the book, "Home So Far Away," it took me a while to get it, but I get it. You know,
right.
I mean, and actually, I actually read it from a personal point of view because I'm English, you know, with a Scottish name, and I live in Catalonia, you know, and there's all sorts of interesting things that come with that, you know, and just some of her observations of Spanish society then. Are not so different to my observations today. You know, the only difference is she's very good at languages and I'm not.
Right. And she can become sort of transnational or fluid in her identity. So there's identity politics.
Well, it's the internationalism, and it's, you know, it's her and she's very clear where she comes from a political point of view, but it's this. There's also this German-Spanish connection, because particularly in Catalonia there's the history of that, and after the Civil War there was a history of that, but it's the timings of how fascism and these things evolved. I found that quite enlightening as well.
So do you know where the title comes from? It's from the Teilman hymn, Die Heimat ist weit, etc.
Well, we'll get a recording that to play afterwards.
Oh, really?
No, I'm joking.
It exists.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe we will. Maybe we'll put it out with the podcast. I mean, so the other things, I mean, I suppose the thing that I'm most interested in this is, with Solidarity Park, it's very much about recovering the historical memory, actually finding out facts. And you mentioned the Ciudad de Barcelona in the book, which is great, because this story is not known. So, you know, that comes out in it as well. But our project has been about...
It's not known because it's suppressed, I think.
Exactly. Yeah, very much so.
So like her first, her hearing of it is that there were only some machines and some food supplies on the ship.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, exactly. I remember reading it, thinking, maybe Judith, you got this wrong, and then you come back to it later on, and you weave it in a way that you explain the suppression of information, and I think that's important, because that's what our project's about. You know, it's about learning those historical memories. But the question, I suppose, the question I'm coming to is. The other thing that Solidarity Park is about is we're not just an historical memory project. We're not just using artists, but we're about fighting fascism today. You know, obviously this book touches on all that. But what I'm interested to draw out is the feminist angle on it, because as I read it, you very subtly and I think quite cleverly drop all the important issues in there. You know, about how women are treated, how men of power treat women in certain situations, how they're recognized, the roles that they will play, you know, all these kind of things. And that is a massive thing in Spain today. The women's movement here has been fantastic over the last years. It's worldwide, you know, inspirational stuff, you know, and for the whole workers' movement, you know, it needs to, you know, just to sit up and look at this. It's also been how Vox, as a far-right neo-fascist, have used to try and counterbalance, you know, this argument. So the dialogue you're dealing with there, the narrative, the subject matter, maybe is a better way of putting it, I think is very relevant today. Is that where you were going with it? Is that how you've been thinking, or?
Where I was going with it is such an interesting aspect, because I have friends who are writers. I mentioned this before, and they say, I'm working on my outline. And I didn't make an outline for this book. It kind of organically grew. And I knew that what I believed in, and I knew what I wanted to, I knew what I wanted in a way. And I knew what I thought was right. And those things kind of came into play. So I guess my feminism, my Jewishness, for whatever that is worth, my musical background, we didn't talk about that yet, my languages, what I knew about history, and my sense of justice all came into play. So as far as an ism, the book is not theoretical. It is not doctrinaire. It's not preachy. I hope.
No, it's not. No.
But I wanted that stuff to be incorporated or incorporated or organically a part of the development of the events and the feelings, which also develop. Klara's feelings develop. I think she evolves in a certain way. Progresses.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it doesn't feel like you've written it in any obvious feministic direction, but me reading it, I certainly picked up that there's this she's experiencing everything, including revolution and counter-revolution. And
I think Spain was tremendously feminist at the beginning of the war. That women were milicianas, and I think it was. I don't know, I'm forgetting the name, who then banned women from the military. They should stay home and darn socks and so on. But women are entering into the sciences. They're entering into politics. Women gained suffrage during the time of the novel. So it is very strong then. It's kind of a legacy for women today, Spanish women today, to look at their sisters toward the beginning of the war and all during the Second Republic and leading up to that are probably motivating women today in Spain and everywhere.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, the character, it comes from a science background.
It was Largo. I think it was Largo Caballero who took women out of the trenches and back into the kitchen.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, the feminist issue being in many ways is a class issue. It's the most important part, but it also goes beyond that, hey? And even within the left-wing circles that she's dealing within, the problems are there. So it's not as if everything's been resolved, And exactly. I think what you find in Spanish Civil War memory stuff, and from those of us to the left, are very heroic pictures of women in the struggle, and they're great. There's nothing wrong with that. But the reality is obviously much more complicated and potentially more ugly. And we still have yet to really solve it by a long, long way. I mean, the basic argument we've had women prime ministers and women leading industry, and actually nothing changes in the rates of pay between people, although there is a shrinking of it.
And the treatment and the abuse and so on, which go on. The feminist side still goes on.
Yeah, and I think for me, in terms of when we're trying to understand historical memory, we're talking. Why do we bother? We bother because it's relevant for today. Obviously, we want to archive history in a correct manner, but as we talked at the top of the show, it's reflected on who that comes from. So. Who's talking about it, how it gets expressed is very important about who we're trying to convince of what really happened. And I think the novel does that in many ways with her relationships with men and with women, but also I think more powerfully, or so far as read, with the institutions and the organizations, those kind of things, which is all relevant stuff for today as well, eh? Yeah,
absolutely. Well, institutions which are almost personified, and for better or for worse.
Yeah.
Because if we think of the United States of the anti-vax movement, for example, and that for me is personified in Trump, even though it's now very spread apart and it's almost become an institution, but. It's sort of, I see his face when I think of anti-vaxxers and people dying.
Yeah.
So, and then what Klara does too is that she's so human that she humanizes everything.
Well, you talked about identity politics, you talked about the anti-vax stuff, and when I've spoken to other guests and we're talking about society today and where it's going, and the first thing for the far right to succeed is that the facts and real things start to get lost in a mystical sort of web of, we don't really know, we don't need to wear masks, and and it's not all about the working class, it's about individuals. And this is a sign of a society in crisis in many ways, and also there's two sides to these things, isn't there? At least. But what's there is the signs, or the, let's say, the the potential for right-wing ideas to grow. When you've got people you've got people with poor housing, people without jobs, and then you've got a confusion of ideology. And the other thing I think you're dealing with, and it hasn't really fully evolved where I am in the book, but I think I'm reading it, is this question of the left in general. Because a couple of things I've read. And it's one of the massive problems of the Spanish Civil War, the divisions on the Republican side, let's put it that way, on tactics. You go into that a bit. I mean, what's your feelings on those kind of things?
Oof, my feelings.
Yeah, it's only a small question,
Right. Again, I think in human terms, that I hate to. Well, I'm going to go Orwellian on us a little bit here.
Okay.
And Animal Farm she had something to say about that, and I'm inclined to think that that part of human nature is exploitive and greedy and power hungry. And that it occurs within every movement, including the movement, including the left, including the Communist Party.
I think this is
what that feels like.
It's an interesting thing with us to grapple with, isn't it? I mean, it's something that I've certainly had to face as an individual within the movement in my own right. That I suppose all the ills of capitalism exist within us. And it's easy to blame capitalism for it, but we try and pretend that we're not it, we're something fresh. And actually we carry a lot of those things with us. I don't know, maybe that's
and we benefit from it. I mean, let's face it.
Well, yeah. And I think all that has to come out in a certain way. The other issue I found as a subject I don't know enough about, I found the Jewish question that you put in there very interesting. I mean, you mentioned in one part that she kind of denies the character, although she doesn't, her history. At the same time, there's a defense of it. At the same time, there's this is to and fro in. There's one part where he talks about Marx and Trotsky and Einstein in there. They're all Jewish people, and then she has to sort of, as she finds her Spanish identity and plays with the troubled German identity, because the rise of fascism is earlier in Germany, and that's how it plays out. Within all that conflict, she's thinking about who the hell she is as a Jew.
Right,
how does that work out in your mind?
I think she connects on some level to a really ancient Jewish tradition, like pre-Christian, pre-Muslim. And when she is in Seville, she comes in contact with the remnants or the echoes of this may be a mythical time, the mythical time of coexistence of the three basic religions. And then she even is able to place herself before those religions in the sacredness of place itself. And that makes her sort of a hyper Jew. I'm not sure if that's a word, but she kind of rises above that, but within it. She's sort
of a dialectical relationship between being in and out of something at one and the same time.
Yeah, it's constant. But living in Spain, she has a need to not show herself as a Jew because of I remember one of the first times when I was in Spain, it was shortly after the Kennedy assassination, and people were saying, well, it was the Jews who did it, right? And that just took me really aback, but it's really deep-seated in Spain. And I've also heard that there was a student poll saying, what would you do if you had a Jew sitting next to you in your class? And well, I would hate it, or I would want to hurt the person. So that is real, and that was something that is operating with me when I wrote the book. Those stories.
Really interesting. No, that's fascinating. I mean, this whole how you have to convert or assimilate. I mean, we have to do that all the time, and it's one of the human conditions, and one of the good things of humanity is we can adapt. But an adaptation is different from an assimilation, and it's different from converting, and it's different from denial, and it's different, so you go through the different words and you end up at somewhere between a positive thing and a negative thing. I mean, you definitely deal with that really well in the book. It's got me thinking on all those things and beyond, because actually this is not just about a Jewish issue. It's very clear in that community, but it's actually, it happens in all of them, in all communities, in all situations, and all people going from one place to another and having to belong, or if they don't belong, they feel isolated and lonely. And these are all things that capitalist society very much generates with the role of the individual, if you like. I don't know. That's some of the things that I was sort of pulling from it. I was trying
private property to possession and private property isolate oneself. And isolate others. They exclude others.
Yeah, I mean, we could come back to the class question that is the predominant thing, but within all this, there's all these other things going on, and not to be ignored. I mean, an interesting thing is we talked quite a lot about the novel, and I think that makes sense because of the subject matter of the podcast show and Solidarity Park project. But I'm very much interested in you as the artist doing that, because actually, talked about being a musician. You talked to me before that you were involved in choirs. And I think there's a real interesting relationship between political activism, historical memory, and the creative mind, and where that comes from. So I'm kind of interested in and obviously you're a writer, of a novel, and you've broken out of the academic staleness, if you like, and come forth into the creative realm of writing, which is quite a leap. I struggled the other way. I got no problem writing a creative poem, but actually writing something that holds together sometimes is not possible. That's why I talk. But I'm sort of interested in your perspective on being an artist. What does that mean for you?
Okay. It is, again, it's openness to variety and variation. I'm a big jazz lover. I used to do jazz, actually play jazz guitar a little bit, and some singing. And I've done arrangements and arrangements and jazz arrangements for choral groups. And that is very freeing, I think, and which allowed me to write fiction because with jazz you have a structure that you have to adhere to, especially when traditional jazz. And based on that, you you ask for the word feeling. Your feelings transport you or take you along on different paths. So improvising is kind of what I do. That's, again, I mentioned I didn't have an outline. And it's, again, I think being an artist is also trusting. I don't know if you believe in the muse, if there's an actual personified muse out there floating over your head and giving you ideas. A muse in shaping your artistry, saying inspiration. So I don't know what form that takes. If that's like a goddess, like the Greek muses with names, but there is it is an energy, I believe, that the same thing that makes me stand in a silent vigil for Palestine. That's just the form that it takes for me. So for each artist, I think there's a muse, or maybe even a panoply of muses in different genres. For example, there's a lot of music in my book.
Yeah.
And there's not very much physical art. There's more architecture than art. But those are just the different muses that come into the artist's life and into the life of the activist. I think that takes you to enact your beliefs, enact your isms, enact your activism.
And I think the form of it. I don't like, you have to be careful with this word, but there's an element of, a spiritual understanding that comes with being an artist. You don't have to be into spiritual things. It's not just about feelings and idealistic reactions. It's actually, I did an interview recently. We've just put it out today with Joey, who's a jazz composer, and I think the title we used was "Being Prepared and Unprepared." And it really stuck me in that interview with him. Because we were toing and froing a lot on this subject. That actually, there's something very important there, and it's like you talked about your book not being sort of, I don't think you used this word, but it's not a polemic. You don't do that. You don't go there. You try and lay out all these really important historical and present day questions without ramming it, but actually you don't flinch either. And I think that's the same with Solidarity Part. I don't think I'm flinching at all from my anti-fascism, from my socialism, from my revolutionary attitudes. At the same time as it's come and have a go at this sculpture. It's a way of bringing things together. I don't know. Spiritual is the wrong word, but I think when you're using the word muse, maybe. That's where you're coming from that. Am I reading you correct in that?
Yeah, you definitely are. Right. We can't put our fingers on it, but
you're not allowed to. It's a bit like the quantum. It's a bit like the wave and the particle. It's a coexistence of two things in two different places that are actually the same thing.
Right.
Going off on one there, but
then but your art form it concretizes, even though stone is concrete, and there is a musique concrète also that. It has to concretize, it has to solidify in order for it to be real. But no, but no, let go of that and consider the other aspects, or the less formed aspects, the more formless.
I was going off on one with the quantum physics thing, but things have more than one place to be at one time, and they can be fluid and they can be solid.
Absolutely.
And stone. I like stone because it is so rigid, and actually to make something so rigid, so flexible, is part of the journey, of the process. Well, there's a whole lot there. Is there anything? The whole question of the Spanish Civil War and the historical memory. You got something that you think we should be doing with that? You're writing a book. I'm doing a memory project with a sculpture. Where do you think we need to take the historical memory question? What do you think we need to be doing? What's that we're maybe not doing yet?
I think the things that are being done are wonderful. The exhumations of the mass graves, that is opening up historical memory, and it's very, very painful. It's wonderful. Poetry, talking, opening up the mind, but it's against so many odds, and the conditioning of all these years of dictatorship. And the pact of oblivion, el pacto del olvido, has done so much damage that there's still lots of healing to be done before memory can be again opened and openly transmitted.
Yeah, I think you're right. Okay, well, thanks very much for coming on the show, Judith. We'll get you back, because I think we've only really touched on a couple of things there. Really, there's so much to be unpacked. I wish you all the best with the book. When's the book going to be out? When can we buy it?
June is the day.
I've been lucky. I've got this the privilege of the podcaster, and I recommend people get into it. But when's it going to be out there for the rest of the world?
The date is June. It can be ordered, but I'm not going to mention the A word yet until I make contact with some independent booksellers.
Okay.
So. But in June,
watch the space. Look at your website. Look at your Facebook. Right. You've got a Facebook page as the author. We'll put all that in the description of the podcast, so people can find you, find your website, find your Facebook page. I have two Facebook pages, one in Spanish as well. Escritora. Okay.
Also, the publisher is She Writes Press, and the book was published in Spanish by El Boletín. Okay. That was my translation, which is not as good as the English version, and it should have been better edited. I'm I take responsibility for that. So, but She Writes Press will put the book out in June.
Okay, well, we look forward to that, and when that comes around again, maybe we'll do an update,
Terrific.
Just before, and obviously that comes out just at the same time as my monument comes out, so the two things run together.
Maybe I'll be there. That would be great.
Well, I hope so. That'd be lovely to be with you in person. Okay, then, Judith. Well, thank you very much again, and we'll put everything in the description. And I wish you the best for the future.
Thank you, and the best to you and your wonderful project.
Thank you very much. Bye now.
Take care. Ciao.
We hope you enjoyed the show. If you have something to say to us, then join our Facebook group or contact us at outaspace.com. That's outa-space.com. See you soon.